Today is a weight training video, which I've been hesitant to do in the past. I've trained with weights since I was about 14, so well over 30 years, but it always feels a bit different to me when discussing it than my endurance stuff that I am much newer to. So I'm sort of learning as I go with that. I'm also not particularly suited to much of it. Things like ultra marathons and cycling and obstacle course races are not designed for people of my size typically. So it always seemed like it might be more interesting to see how I got on trying to have a go at those things. Or funnier, but people still ask, what do I do, particularly while the gyms are shut here in the garage, and also how do I fit it in around the cardio stuff, the endurance stuff. So yesterday was my chest and shoulders day. I'll take you through what I did. Technically it was the push day out of my current training plan, which is Mondays off and then push pull legs back to Monday. But that can change at any time, depends on my priorities, what events, if any, have I got coming up, how much free time have I got with work and other things, are the gyms open, are the gyms closed, and it can change into anything because over the years I've done everything, full body training right the way through to bro splits and everything in between. So it can take any form. Ultimately, a lot of my training ends up looking like a bit of a mashup of conflicting, contrary techniques that when put together are suboptimal and not particularly efficient. And I don't care. My next two events coming up are a 50k ultra marathon and then a 20-mile mountain race. And on top of that, I still want to be in here on Zwift when the gym does open. I want to get back in there and lift heavy again. I've got 12 obstacle course races coming up this year. Everything conflicts with everything else anyway. It's all contrary to being able to do one particular thing very well. It's just the way I like it. To me, it's more important to be able to do lots of things quite well rather than one particular thing brilliantly. If I look at a dedicated cyclist who can't shoulder press his own water bottle or a YouTubing bodybuilder that can't run 5k, I think they are missing a trick in terms of overall fitness. It's my opinion. They are a pet shop that only sells rodents. If you love your hamsters, you're laughing. I want to be able to get dog food and a goldfish in one go, so that shop sucks for me. Now they might think that the way I train is nuts and I'm a complete muppet, and that's fine. The vast majority of human beings in the West are fat and useless, so the bodybuilder, the cyclist, me, we aren't the problem. As long as we're individually happy with what we're doing, it's all good. So let's dive into what I did yesterday and I'll elaborate as we go on the why and the hows. First up was dumbbell bench press. Reps up in the 12 to 15 range because I don't have the weight in here to go heavier than that and up the intensity. So I tend to go after volume here instead. I'd already warmed up, lots of mobility work before I started, so I was ready to go. If I was in the gym proper and going with a high intensity heavyweight session, the warm up would have been a much longer affair. Actually, intensity and volume, let me just define that. Intensity is dictated by the weight that you lift, and volume relates to the amount of times you lift it, reps and sets. But that is a very simplified explanation. So if I was in the gym proper doing a heavy press, I can only do 4, 5, 6 reps of before failure. That'd be a very intense session. Here, as you can see, doing many more reps, much less intense, greater volume. And that volume will help with building endurance. Typically, volume, endurance, intensity will give strength, something in the middle will give growth, but that's a really oversimplified explanation of it. And of course, there are huge overlaps. Someone training high intensity for strength will also clearly develop some endurance and vice versa. And talking of endurance, I keep the rest on these sessions short to further improve that endurance effect. I don't want the sort of large recovery sessions between sets that I might be taking if I was lifting much heavier weights for those lower repetition sets. So here I did 5 sets. I did 2 with the bench flat, 3 with the bench on a very slight incline. If I'm in the gym, I'll start flat with a barbell bench press just to move some heavier weight, but I'll always move on to dumbbell chest work. I have an imbalance slightly between left and right size in terms of size and strength. I'm much stronger on the left, and so by using dumbbells, I can ensure that the stronger side is not overcompensating for the weaker right side, as it has a tendency to do when I'm using a barbell. So after dumbbell bench presses was dips, and in here I use my rings that I've got hanging up. They require much more stability and control than a fixed bar would do in the gym. You can see my arms shaking around trying to hold myself steady. I also will cheat with these. I rest my feet up behind me and take as little weight as I can on my feet, but I'm taking some weight. It especially helps if I've done, as I have here, some chest work already and I've pre-fatigued the area. Occasionally I'll start with dips much earlier in the session and I can do those proper, as it were. But one benefit to cheating them like this is I can get much higher repetition numbers. That then leads to the endurance. It also allows me to tip slightly further forward, which is a much more comfortable position for my shoulder to maintain in. And that was 3 sets on the dips, keeping the rest again very short between each one. Actually, just jumping back to intensity and volume in relation to what I'm trying to achieve. I want to maintain a level of size so that I look the way I want to look despite doing the endurance events I do. But I also want to have the muscular strength and endurance to do those events and to do them successfully. That might mean sprint finish on a Zwift race, or being able to carry a heavy sandbag on a Spartan run. And again, those objectives themselves are contrary to each other, because ultimately if I wanted to focus on maintaining or increasing size, I'd go with much more high intensity sessions and heavier weight, and I'd go with much lighter weight, much more volume, much higher repetitions if I was trying to focus solely on endurance work. So it's all conflicting. When the gym's open proper, I'll simply bounce between the two approaches. When I'm in here, because I simply have less weight available, I take advantage of that fact and just focus on the volume stuff. Next up is regular push-ups, except at this point my chest is heavily fatigued, so I go to failure too soon. So what I do to build in the volume, to get the extra repetitions out, is I'll drop down to my knees. I also, at that point, will start to incorporate some band work for additional contraction on the chest. One of the issues with doing dumbbell press, dips, press up, is that in every case, your hands finish here. Your chest is at maximum contraction when the upper arm is, of course, much closer to the body. The chest brings your arms all the way in. So if you're finishing here, there's more of that range of motion to come. I have a specific exercise for that coming up in a second, but this is just an easy way of getting that push-up made harder, even though I've dropped to my knees, and at the same time getting that extra contraction in as well, that extra range of motion. So that last chest exercise here is upper chest raises, upper chest V's. In the gym, I would do cable crossover work to get that maximum contraction type work going on. This exercise just tries to mimic that, using a really light weight to target that upper chest at the real peak of the contraction. Do those to failure, and I drop set down to a rubber band if I need to. So that's chest. Next up is shoulders. But first, the question I hear most, when do you do the cardio? The answer is anytime I like. Yesterday was actually a cardio rest day, but had it not been, I'd happily go for a run, come straight back in here and crack on with the weight session. Today I am running, and then I'm back in here for a pull session today. All I'll do is maybe tweak the volume down a little bit depending on how hard the run was. Now, if I was training specifically to just get bigger, I'd probably drop the cardio right down if I do any cardio at all. But that's not what I'm after. I need to be able to do a 1 hour Zwift ride on the bike and then still drop 1200 watts for a sprint finish, or run 20 kilometers through a forest and still have the strength in my upper body to climb a rope at the end of a Spartan race. So going for a 10K run, then coming in here and doing some weights, no problem whatsoever. Obviously I'm sensible. I don't go and run a marathon and then come in here and start doing some heavy squatting, but I have a greater flexibility around cardio and weights being pushed together than many experts in either strength or endurance training would say you should have. For me, mashing them together, not a problem. The only thing I do take care with is if I start my weight training session and I'm already tired, I will watch my form very closely. No cheat reps, everything nice and strict and under control. Okay, shoulders. Start off with the dumbbell press. I should say actually, when I'm training heavy, I'll split chest and shoulders apart, but put them on the same day. I'm very lucky the gym is just around the corner, so I can go and do chest in the morning, go back in the afternoon and do shoulders. But when I'm doing volume training for endurance, I want to induce that fatigue. So jumping into shoulders straight off the back of chest is fine by me. Dumbbell press, even in the gym, I use dumbbells rather than a barbell. Number one, it helps with that imbalance I spoke about. I don't want one side helping the other. Also, I'm quite tight in the shoulders, which is something I'm working on, needs to be sorted. But while I'm trying to sort it, having my hands back on a barbell just gives me, it's not comfortable. My hands are more comfortable if I can bring my elbows slightly forward, almost into sort of an Arnold press kind of feel, but elbows in front, just easier time on my shoulders. So dumbbell press, I do these seated if I've already trained chest. If my shoulders were fresh, I would stand, I'd incorporate some assistance from my legs to move slightly greater amount of weight. But with already fatigued shoulders, the last thing I want to be doing is cheating the reps up. My joints are too old for exhaustion and bouncing and cheating all at once. I don't use the backrest, importantly, on the bench, because if you do, it becomes very easy when you get tired to lean back against the back and push forwards rather than directly up. So I'm sat down, but with no backrest. Next up, lateral raises. For years and years, I did these with the technique of raising the little finger at the end of the movement. Tipping the jug of water out is how I was taught it and how I did it. And it does invoke more involvement from the medial deltoid, but at the expense of that internal shoulder rotation. I'm too old for messing up my rotator cuff, so now thumbs stay up. Thank you very much. Again here, if my shoulders were fresh and I had not just done chest, I would happily use a slightly heavier weight and incorporate some more body movement to get the dumbbell up and then really just focus on the negative. But as with the shoulder press, when my shoulders are already fatigued, I just keep this simple and keep it strict, much less chance of injury. I use a light weight and will even drop down onto a rubber band if I need to get the extra reps out. And at that point, I just stop counting, I just go to failure. I then move to front raises, which is obviously a big overlap with side raises. So it's only 2 sets of each, 2 to the side, 2 to the front. Again, I'll drop set that down using rubber bands and go to failure. And then the last one, which I didn't film actually, is a rear delt row. I used to do a prone rear delt fly. So flat on the bench, arms out to a reverse fly for the rear delt. And I never really felt it actually hit my rear delt at all. What I do now is a rear delt row, which is effectively a leaning on a bench as you would do for a one-arm row, where you'd keep the elbow in tight to work the lats down the side, but I'll use an underhand grip, let the elbow come away from the body slightly, and then at the top of the movement, work on that external rotation, which the rear delt helps with. And I find that rear delt row just a much better way of really hitting the back of the shoulder. So that's my last shoulder exercise. Okay, that is chest and shoulders done. And I did then do a couple of sets of tricep work. I would happily leave triceps off. If I had got enough volume in, spent enough time already, my triceps were at that point already toast from all the pushing movements, so I'd happily drop the tricep work. But as I had a bit of time, I did some, and I did them with my blood flow restriction bands as well. Blood flow restriction bands are a very good way of increasing the workload without increasing the weight. There's a lot of very interesting science on blood flow restriction training. In a nutshell, you apply what is effectively a tourniquet to the upper arm or the thigh as well. They can be used on the legs too. And you allow arterial blood flow into the limb, but you prevent blood flow going back out again, effectively pooling blood within the arm, which increases the intensity of the exercise without needing to apply extra weight. I find them a very good way of basically stressing out the arms. In particular, I'll use them for things like bicep work after my back work, without having to just simply load up on more weight at a point in the training session towards the end often where you simply can't load up on more weight, you are too tired. This will invoke the stress of additional weight without the weight. I like them a lot. Stating the blindingly obvious, do your research if you plan to use them. I am not an expert. I'm telling you what I do, not what you should do. Cutting off circulation to parts of your body has associated risks with it. Do not be leaving me thumbs down because you cut off the blood flow to your arm and it went blue and fell off. Okay, so that was it. Yesterday's session was just over an hour, about an hour and 15, I think, which is about right for me for a volume session. Had I done cardio before, I might have made it a little bit shorter, but hour 15 feels good. If I'm doing a high intensity, heavy weight session, 45 minutes tops is typical. And my push, pull legs off regime means that it's a good 2 days before I hit those same muscle groups again. One of the things with high volume training, particularly when I'm combining it with everything else I'm doing, is that it is easy to overtrain and injure yourself. So I'm very, very careful to make sure I have that decent rest between sessions. And also I focus very heavily on my mobility, my stretching, massage, foam rolling, pretty much look after myself. Hopefully you found it interesting. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe if you've not done so already. Ultimately, does my training allow me to get as big as I could be? No. As strong as I could be? No. Do I have as much endurance as I could have? No, it doesn't. Mashing it all together doesn't yield those things. But I'm not small, I'm not weak, and if someone said to me, let's go do a park run, I wouldn't start panicking. So in general, I'm happy. If I was a pet shop, I'd stock everything. Apart from cats. I hate cats.